It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, when a forgotten telegram surfaced, tucked away in a dusty typewriter desk, untouched for decades. Its words weren't just old, they were a warning, a message from the past that echoed into the present. A murder, mirrored across time. A mystery that refused to die. Tonight, we dive into a story where the line between past and present blurs, where obsession lingers long after the people are gone, and where one message, ignored for 75 years, might finally reveal the truth. This is a tale of secrets, shadows, and crimes that refuse to stay buried. Welcome to the mystery that time itself couldn't hide. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when the telegram was discovered. Not delivered, not mailed, just tucked away in a dusty corner of an old typewriter desk, forgotten for decades. The paper was yellowed and brittle, the ink faded into ghostly gray. Yet the words leapt from it with a clarity that made Robert Hayes shiver. He's gone. She knows. Must act before dawn. Don't fail. It was dated November 17, 1947. A signature, or perhaps a hurried scrawl, clung to the bottom, almost illegible. What startled Hayes most wasn't the age of the telegram, but the details. They described a murder that matched a modern crime down to the smallest, uncanny specifics. Robert Hayes was a historian and collector, someone who sifted through old documents and letters to preserve the past. But this was different. This telegram wasn't history. It was a message, delayed by decades, and chillingly relevant. In the present day, a woman named Lillian Harper had been found dead in her home, 2 streets over from an old steel plant. The scene, the method, even the warnings left near her body mirrored the words Hayes held in his hand. Detective Sarah Klein, known for her work on cold cases, read the telegram carefully. She waits alone. The mark is set. Midnight is thin. Finish it tonight. She paused. Not many things unsettled her, but this did. Hayes explained he had bought the desk at an estate sale. No one had touched it in decades. Klein studied the telegram, noting the precision of the language and the urgency that transcended time. Whoever had written it had intended for someone to act, but that someone never came. Until now. Edward Mallory, the man mentioned in the telegram, was described as tall, dark-haired, with eyes that didn't sleep. Modern records had no trace of him alive, but archives showed he had worked at the steel mills in 1947 and disappeared a year later. No criminal record, no explanation, no closure. They traced the old addresses. The neighborhood, though modernized, still held the echoes of the past. Hayes provided photographs from the 1940s. The layout, the proximity to the river, even the narrow streets matched the telegram's descriptions. It was almost as if time had preserved the stage for a story that refused to end. The modern murder reinforced the connection. Harper's death bore hallmarks of Edward Mallory's telegram. The note found at the scene echoed the same cryptic urgency. He knows you saw. Cannot wait. Must be done. Klein compared the texts carefully. It wasn't just thematic. The rhythm, the phrasing, even the word choices aligned across decades. Margaret Reynolds was a name that emerged from both timelines. She had been a teenager in 1947, last seen with Edward before he vanished. In the present day, Harper had been researching Margaret, uncovering the town's industrial history and tracing the lives of people who had disappeared. The intersection was no longer coincidence. Margaret, now in her 90s, lived quietly near the river. When Klein and Hayes visited, she opened the door with a faint, knowing smile. "I've been expecting someone," she said. Her words were careful, measured, but her eyes betrayed something deeper, a flicker of guilt, of fear, as if the past she had carried all these years had awakened. Margaret spoke slowly, recalling Edward and the telegram, yet refused to confess to any crime. Her memory was a puzzle Klein had to piece together, a series of fragments that hinted at truths long buried. Harper had unwittingly stepped into the same story Margaret had kept hidden for decades. As the investigation unfolded, a pattern emerged. Evidence suggested the modern note had been crafted using materials reminiscent of the 1940s, a rare ink still available from the same supplier. Someone, deliberately or obsessively, was recreating Edward Mallory's words, echoing his intentions in the present. Klein studied Edward's life. A quiet laborer, unremarkable in the public eye, he had vanished without explanation. The telegram suggested meticulous planning and premeditation. These were not random acts, they were deliberate. Harper's death may have been the unintended consequence of curiosity, but the blueprint had survived, waiting for someone to read it, or live it. The town itself seemed complicit in the story, its streets and abandoned buildings holding memory like shadows. Hayes spent nights poring over photographs and documents, piecing together a past that had refused to stay buried. Klein imagined Edward in 1947, plotting his actions with precision, and a present-day figure, perhaps unknowingly, following the same steps. The line between past and present felt perilously thin. The breakthrough came from a detail in the telegram itself, a subtle misalignment in the typewritten letters. Not random, but a cipher pointing to a location, a lockbox hidden inside the old steel mill. Inside, behind rusted panels, they found journals, letters, and photographs documenting Edward Mallory's life, including confessions of crimes never solved. The journals did not solve Harper's murder, but they revealed obsession that spanned decades. Edward had planned, recorded, and left messages across time, as if daring anyone to follow. One entry read, "If they cannot see the pattern, they will repeat it. Time is a river, my hand moves through it, unseen." The telegram, unread for 75 years, had survived as a message, a warning, a confession. Past and present intertwined in ways that defied logic, proving that obsession could echo long after the people themselves were gone. And so it waits, folded and faded, in a drawer somewhere. A message that crossed time to reach the living. If you were to find it, you might read it too, just as someone always has, and perhaps always will. Because sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried. And sometimes, the messages it leaves behind refuse to be ignored.